we have a database, we have a model for our to-do list item, and now we need to connect those to the actual list view in our app. To do that, let's open up our main page.xaml.cs, and then inside here, under the constructor, before initialize, or rather after initialize component, first we have to check there is actually something in our database. Otherwise we'll get a horrible error if there isn't. So let's just say check database populated, like that. And then if we've checked that it's populated, then we can actually assign some things to our list view. So type list view, and now this variable name is being pulled from main page.xaml here. So list view dot, and we need an items source, because every list needs a source of data, like a well of data, to actually put inside its cells. And to do this, we're going to have another method that we haven't created yet, which is get to do list. Right, so we have two red methods. Let's create them. The very first one we want to create is check the database is populated. So let's have void, and let's copy that down to here and create our method, and then it turns to a normal color. So what we're going to do in here is check if the database is empty. If it is, we're going to put in some default values so we don't get any errors. And the first thing we do is say if, and then we want to grab a connection to our database, so new database dot get to do items, and this gets a list of items in the database. And then we have to count those, so dot count. And if that is less than 1, that means we have no items. I would like you to perform the following code. And so I'm just going to put a comment here, which is fill up database with default. So the first thing we have to do is create a list of the things that we're going to create. So var items is equal to a new list, and this list needs a type, which is to do list item, and initialize it. Now we need to add some things to that list. So for int I is equal to 0 until I is less than 10, I++. And what that's going to do is actually take me in a for loop, and it's going to count I one by one every time it goes around until it reaches I is 9 or less than 10. And that means, because we start at 0, I is actually going to go around 10 times. This loop is going to run 10 times. And because our app has 10 to-do list items, that's perfect. So each time it runs through, we want to add something to our items. So we say items.add, open our brackets, and then on a new line, just so it's clear, we say we want you to create a new to-do list item. Open brackets, open brace, and I would like you to give this a title of task space quote, and then plus, and then in brackets we're going to say I plus 1. And why do we do that? Because I want this to say task 1 every time it goes round, then task 2, then task 3. But I actually starts on 0 and ends on 9. So if I left it without the plus 1, it would say I0, I1, I2 up to I9, or task 9 rather. But if I add the 1, then it's correct. And then of course I have to change that, because it's currently a number, to a string. And then comma. Then I have to give it some content, and that's equal to description and let's have dash tap to edit and then a comma. And we had one last thing, which was alpha. And we're going to do some neat maths here. Alpha goes from 0 to 1. So 0 means your item is see-through, 1 means it's opaque. So we have to subtract 1 minus, and then open two brackets and type double I, because we have to cast this I to a double, because that's what alpha expects. I, and then we're going to divide it by 20. So if you think about it, every time we go around this loop, we're saying 0 over 20, 1 over 20, 2 over 20. And then we're saying 1 minus that value. So the alpha is slowly decreasing as we go round and round this loop. So let's close off that bracket and close off the final bracket, and then because it's a number and we need a string, we say dot to string. And then close off the initialization of our item and close off that bracket. There we go, everything has turned to the correct color. Now we have a list of items. What we want to do is, under this for loop, add these to the database. So say new database dot add to do items, and then pass it the list that we just created. And that should sort that out. Now we need to create our get to do list. So let's copy that, come down here, and this is going to pass back a list of to-do list items. Open our brackets, create our method. And this is just a couple of lines, which is var items is equal to new database, open brackets, dot get to do items, and this passes back a list. And then finally we have to return those items. So coming up to our constructor, whenever we jump into here, everything gets initialized. It checks the database is populated. So if it isn't, it will actually populate it for us. So this really is only going to happen the very first time we load the app. After that, this will always have some items, so it'll never run again. Then it's going to jump to our list view and set its items as whatever it gets from get to do list, which will be the items from our database. Let's hit play and actually test that. And it should pre-populate our database and then show us our list of things. Now if you recall, that alpha that we set is slowly decreasing. It's slowly getting lower and lower. And what's happened here is, if I come back to Xamarin and stop it running, in our main page.xaml, with our image, we set our opacity as a binding to alpha. So it went off, found that alpha attribute, and bound it to it. And of course, it goes without saying, it's also binding this title and content from the data model that we've created. Okay, that is how you insert database items and get them out again and display them in a list view. In the next section, we're actually going to look at wiring a bit more up to this app and making it a little more functional.